Hello, everyone. It's Claire. I'm back for another office hour. Welcome. We're going to be talking about astrology today. I usually do this for about an hour, and sometimes it goes a little bit over. It depends. I have a lot of stuff. I did a very short call for questions, so I'm sorry if people missed that. Uh, Things got full rather quickly, and I had a couple things from last month. But of course, if anyone has made the effort to be here live, you get first priority. So if you have any questions about astrology, techniques, the weather currently, everything's kind of fair game as long as I can answer it. And if I can't, I usually know some other people who do know, so I can refer you on. Uh, let's see if I have any announcements. If you are here live, there's a chat over at the right-hand side of your screen. You can ask me your questions there if you have any. And let's see, I know we're going to talk about lots today. We're going to talk about elections for asking people on dates, basically, romance elections, uh, which there's a few different kinds. Maybe I should probably talk about that too. And then I was also going to do an example of the lunar nodes across the first and the seventh. Someone had asked that last month at the end, so I'm going to circle back around for that today. And I have a backlog. So whatever else I get to. Yeah, I think I don't have anything else new. I'm still doing readings. You can find all of my things at www.aligninglightastrology.com. I have writings. I do a monthly newsletter you can sign up for there. I have monthly writings that more and more I've been able to incorporate some rising sign horoscopes. I know that's what people are here for. And I mean, this month. It's August 2025. It's August 14th as I record this. Uh, it's been hard for me to get stuff done this month. I don't want to it just reflects the sky. I'm not blaming the sky. It is what it is. But yeah, I really want to do my next rising sign horoscope video. I want to do it on Virgo because we're going to have a bunch of kind of the Virgo Pisces axes because that's where we're going to have eclipses. So that'll be, watch out for that. That's coming. And now that I've told you, I have to do it. I'm going to do that to myself. Um, let's see. I think I'm going to start with my first topic, which will be um, romance elections. Oh, no, not Lou Pearlman. I got so busted. No, we're not doing romance elections with Lou Pearlman. He was going to come up later if I got to it. But anywho, let's talk about romance. Um, so this is going to be very specific to your chart. It's actually very difficult for me to give generalized information on choosing astrology to choosing the best times to get the most optimal results. It's difficult to give that advice to general folks. However, there's some general things I'm going to look for anytime I'm electing. So really what I'm going to be giving you today are just really good general election principles that you can apply to anything you want to turn out well, including asking someone on a date or sending someone that first message on Bumble or something. So I'll be given some general astrology, electional astrology stuff. And then as well, I assume if you are trying to use astrology to choose good times to do romantic activities, I assume you know a bit about astrology. I'm going to assume that you are an advanced learner. So I'm going to skip over some things that, maybe I wouldn't otherwise. So I'm just going to put that container around it. But let me get my notes up. I mean, first things first, I'm not going to be looking for a rising sign, but let's clock the moon wherever the moon is. And let's make sure that the moon is applying firstly not to Saturn. Anyone but Saturn, also not Mars, if we can avoid it. Um, Saturn here is the Lord of rejection. And Mars also, they're more about like cutting things away, separations. It's not the energy we necessarily want, even though Mars can be about pursuits. which is why I might allow it in a night chart in the right person if it was in charge of their seventh or fifth. So, like, there's caveats for that one. But in general, if we can not have the moon applying to Saturn, that's a really good first step. The other thing I want to try to do is have the moon applying to one of the fortunates, one of the benefics here. So in this chart, I think that's actually the case. I think I got really lucky right now. I'm just going to check myself. Yeah, the moon is applying to the next visible planet will be Jupiter. So right now would actually be a great time in general. The moon is applying to Jupiter and Venus. So that's what we want to do is make sure the moon is applying to benefics. Either of them is great. What aspect? Any. Ideally like a sextile or a trine or a square with benefics. Ideally with the benefics earlier in zodiacal order. So like if we can pretend they were over in Aquarius overcoming from a square, that'll make them stronger. But just in general. Okay. And let me, oh, I just did a technical difficulty. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. Hello, Asim. Welcome. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Okay, second thing on the list. If we're going to try to do anything and have it turn out well, especially for romantic stuff. Now, this one is going to be really specific, and it's going to be specific for each of our natal charts. So you'll have to know your rising sign. You'll have to know your chart and know what your rising sign is. So I apologize. This is not for anyone if you don't know what your rising sign is, which is very common. This one might not be as useful. However, find out what your fifth and seventh house, find out what those are, what signs are there, and the planets ruling them. So for instance, this Aquarius rising person, they've got the sun ruling their seventh house and they've got Mercury ruling their fifth house. I'm choosing these because the seventh house is committed partnership. It's important one-on-one relationships. And the fifth house, the joy of Venus. And Venus is in charge of love, pleasure, romance, sex, yum yums. Now I know, we can get into the nuance that sex is part of more than one house, depending on how we talk about it, and that also Mars can be important in sex. And that's a whole discussion. And maybe I can have that some other time. But if I'm just looking at houses, I'm going to look at the fifth because it's the joy of Venus and I want my romance stuff to be fun and to feel good. So I'm going to look at the fifth and look at that planet that rules that. And what I want to make sure, so for this person, let's just look at Mercury retrograde. Unless you've got a Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, I maybe wouldn't ask someone out on a date when Mercury's retrograde if you're an Aquarius rising. It's not always going to be a deal breaker, but it's not, the wind is not at your back. It's like you're trying to go meet someone on the date and you're getting rained on or, misunderstanding the time or, something like that. Well, here it's going to be extra because Mercury rules your fifth, Aquarius rising. The sun can't do retrogrades, but I would, I would recommend, avoiding eclipses, for instance, as a time to maybe be a little wary. And then also, if either of these planets are around Pluto, so the Lord of the seventh, the Lord of the fifth, I'm not going to say Pluto in a place because they're there for like 20 years. Like, what are you going to do? Not date for 20 years? Like, it's not going to work probably. But yeah, making sure they're not afflicted by Pluto when you're asking people on dates. That's usually a good bet. And afflicted by Pluto means especially like a square or an opposition from Pluto. So really recently, I mean, for an Aquarius rising, I would recommend like July, not a great month. We just had some Mercury Pluto oppositions. We just had Mercury retrograde in the seventh. Again, unless you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, not a great time. So we want to really be looking at the condition of those rulers. When I had gotten this question, and I actually apologize because the person who asked me this, I kind of gave him an answer at the time, and I said I was going to circle back around and do it last month, and I didn't. And so I'm doing it this month. But they had actually asked me about it in regards to doing asking someone on a date or approaching someone um, during a Jupiter Cazimi, and if that would be a good time. And I had a few thoughts about that because, like, in a Cazimi, that would be when the sun, when a planet is in the heart of the sun, especially in my opinion, a visible planet. They're doing this whole underworld journey. They're moving through the beams of the sun. And when they're in the heart of the sun, especially within 1 degree, that's a really special time where the last one we had here, June 24th, 2025, is a special time where that planet, in this case Jupiter, is they're like shielded from the beams of the sun in this case. Now they would be anyway for chariot reasons, which I won't get into, but for general purposes. Cazimi is a nice time for a planet. But the problem with Cazimi is that it's flanked. Let's use a different example. I want a planet that doesn't have their chariot. Um, like how about, no, not that one. That's another one. The last one we just had. So here, Mercury. Mercury in the heart of the sun. We just had this on July 31st. This is where Mercury is getting a break from being under those beams of the sun, which can be a difficult place for a planet within 15 degrees. And the problem is that on either side, they're going right back into that difficulty. So I don't really, Cazimis can be okay, but you're still dealing with either having to have that planet move out of those other 15 degrees, right? And that could be less ideal. That's like then having to wait for a final response or something until that planet becomes visible. So those are my exact thoughts on asking people on dates on Cazimis. And I think that about sums up. I mean, Venus as a general significator as well for dating and elections. Generally when I'm doing my forecast, I do a monthly forecast. If Venus is being afflicted by Pluto, if or like a conjunction with Pluto, any of the fifth, seventh house lords conjunct Pluto, Venus conjunct Pluto, that's also something I don't necessarily recommend. It's going to happen. People are out there not knowing astrology when they're asking people on dates. But yeah, if we know astrology, I would personally avoid that. And when I was dating back in the day, in 2023, I was trying to avoid stuff like that. So, what I wish I would have avoided more was Neptune. They're another one maybe to avoid. So yeah, avoid those outers. They can add a little something that you didn't intend. So those are kind of my quick and dirty rules for elections when we're dating, asking people on dates. This also works for a lot of general things for, handing in a job application or application for something else where you want the response to be yes. And so again, just to summarize that, those things were having the moon applying to benefics, not applying to Saturn. Having the lords of the seventh and the fifth houses direct, not in difficult condition, not under the beams, ideally. Venus and any of those previously aforementioned lords not afflicted by Pluto or the malefics ideally, but we'll put that aside. Yeah, and I mentioned Venus, not afflicted by Pluto. Those are all of the things that I would look for. So hopefully that's helpful to someone. Let me see if there's some activity. Hello, K-Wow. Hello, Kate. Meow meow. Oh, wow. I completely dropped all of the lion and cat puns this entire Leo season. What the heck? Oh, the moon is or the sun is at 22 degrees. You guys got away with the sun moving through 22 whole degrees of Leo before I realized I hadn't made a single cat pun. Ah, what a lost opportunity. Oh well, everyone gets off the hook that way. Don't have to listen to my dad jokes. Hello, tapestry. A single window. I don't know what that means, but I'm sorry. Uh, what about the recent Mercury retrograde stationing within 1 degree of a natal ascendant? Is the more is that more benefic or malefic in nature? Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, so Tapestry is asking in terms of meow meow, in terms of Mercury retrograde stationing. Let's say Mercury retrograde stationing, and yeah, I have my chart up, and yeah, so you must be a Leo rising or something. So let's say Mercury was stationing like by transit right on top of someone's ascendant. Does that make it more malefic or more benefic? And I would say neither, because it's going to depend on what is around that transiting Mercury and what other uh, what other aspects they have. So if we let's look at that station that just happened on August 11th. So let's see. The benefics can't really see. They're not able to see, but Mercury is ruled by a very well situated sun. So that will generally make planets in that sign behave better. So Mercury is going to be better behaved because they're here being received by the sun. Mercury, I liken Mercury to tofu. Mercury will take on whatever flavor is around it by body or by ray. So, in this case, Saturn was sending a trine to Mercury. Mercury and Saturn were connecting that way. We had some Mars on that as well, but not in a hard or tense aspect. So it's not that malefic looking of a Mercury. It's not the most benefic or helpful looking Mercury, but it's certainly not the worst at all. So that's a very case by case basis though. So I don't have any hard or fast rules other than you really do have to look at what Mercury is being affected by. They'll pick up whatever they're around. Very influential or influenceable. I forget what that word is. You all know what I'm saying. But yeah, great question. Hope that helps. And the next thing I want to go to would be the nodes. So I'm not gonna repeat a ton about the nodes, but I did link below. There's been a couple other times I have discussed that. I am going to discuss it here again, but I'm not going to tell the whole story of the dragon and everything. Go back and listen to the ones I linked below. It was actually January and February. I got into those lunar nodes pretty heavily. So check out what I said there, and I will repeat a little bit today. Um, oh, but before nodes, one more nuance. There's a question about Mercury. So going back to tofu, to Mercury, there's a question. Mercury likes rising above the sun, at least I think. Oh, that's reflective of the theme mundi. Um, yeah, I guess, there's a thing about like, and this might be something different, but Mercury's sect or the rejoicing, like if Mercury is in its morning star position, I think that it likes to be above the horizon. And someone correct me if I'm wrong, and now I want to look this up later. So if I got this wrong, I'll look at it, I'll revisit it next month. But I'm pretty sure that if more Mercury is in their morning star position, they're rising before the sun, they like to be on the top half of the chart, versus if they're in their evening star position, they like to be in the lower half of the chart. And or maybe I'm conflating that with if it's Mercury in their morning star position, they like to be in a more like masculine diurnal sign. I think that's what it is. I guess I don't know how Mercury rejoices with hemisphere if they do that. Um, but then if Mercury's in their evening star phase, they like to be in a nocturnal sign, like an earth or a water sign. and then they're happier there. So, yes, and I'm getting something wrong about it, I'm sure. But yeah, there's something about like Mercury's phase and that deciding what Mercury likes. There's something there. And then if we look at the thema mundi, which very interestingly, we have Sun in Leo. And yeah, Mercury is both in the third, ruling the third, ruling the 12th in the thema mundi. Um, I'm not sure how that ties in. So yeah, I don't know how to respond to that question. I apologize. I just went off on sect land. Yeah, Mercury can be all kinds of stuff. They are very flexible. And that, I mean, it's kind of funny too how they have their joy in the first house, speaking of the thema mundi, or not the thema mundi, the planetary joys. Mercury finds their joy in the first. And the first house is that place where, you know, like in this example, we've got the ascendant and we've got part of that first house above the horizon and part of that first house below. And Mercury was the only planet in the myth that could go into the upper and lower worlds. So they're so flexible in so many ways. It comes out in a lot of different ways. I agree. Or even just the multitudinous of things, ambiguity, Mercury being ambiguity, Mercury liking ambiguity, Mercury liking a multiplicity. When I think about Gemini, I mean, Gemini, very both and very going kind of in all kinds of directions. Yeah. Um, all right. Nodes. Nodes. What about them? So we've got the question was specifically around, I don't know if they have this in their chart or if, which I really shouldn't be answering unless I'm seeing the whole chart. But I'm gonna poke around at it. But they wanted me to look at South Node in seventh house. They might have this transiting. So I don't know if I'm thinking about this natally or transiting. I mean, it's basically the same information, but we are applying it a little bit differently. But yeah, let's talk about North Node in the first house, South Node in the seventh house. And I do have kind of an interesting example of it. So in general, if we look at the Hellenistic tradition, they talk about the South Node being decrease, the North Node being increase. In that way, it does feel like there's a bit of a directionality set up that there's this pull toward the North Node. Modern astrologer, contemporary astrology talks about it as more of a benefic, kind of life-affirming thing. I am more of the skeptical kind of tradition, looking at the nodes as distorting influences. They do change things that they're around. And I actually brought a prop. I brought my wine glass, which actually I had a physics teacher who was trying to explain once about how a black hole distorts light and distorts all these things. And if you look through the bottom of a wine glass, if anyone has one of these around, it distorts everything behind it. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can see. Oh yeah, like that. You can see it kind of distorting, making it hard to make out like, I don't know, does my face look really tiny? So it distorts stuff. I feel like that's what the lunar nodes do. And it's even the way that during an eclipse, which is what is astronomically going on with the lunar nodes, that's where the sun and the moon are going to be crossing, and we actually get eclipse action. You've got the light of one luminary being obscured or distorted by the other temporarily. So there's that. And so they're kind of they don't add stability. I think they add kind of a destabilizing influence. The North Node increasing, the South Node decreasing. We can get into the South Node being a letting go. I like thinking about setting something down, putting something on a back burner. Um, it doesn't have to be a permanent, there's a difference between permanent decrease and temporary decrease. I see both. Same with the increase. Some permanent increases, some temporary increases. So it's not whatever's going on. I mean, this is true for everything. Nothing's forever. But when the nodes are going through here, if there's a decrease or an increase, know that that might only be for the year and a half that the nodes are traveling through that place. I've given examples in the past where South Node moves through someone's third house and a sibling moves away and they don't see them as much anymore as they used to. The example I have about South Node in the first or in the seventh, North Node in the first, and this is a good segue from the dating. When I started dating my partner, he was going through his nodal return. He has this natally, and he was having this in transit when we met. Or no, it was slightly after we met because they were first in Pisces, Virgo before they, or no, were they wobbling around? It was when they were in Aries and Libra. That's when that was going on. It doesn't matter. The nodes were in his first and his seventh. And I knew this because I looked at his chart. And I was like, what's this guy dating or doing, dating? And, there should be decrease in the seventh, right? Not increase, not, you know, partners coming in. It should be partners leaving. What's that about? Um, but what it can be is letting go of a certain idea of how something is going to go. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe he had some other options that he had to let go of when I came waltzing in. So there's something that can be let go of, that can be let go of internally. It can speak to things being let go of and like you're literally no longer seeing something anymore external to you. But that was a thing that was going on that maybe he was letting go of certain ideas about how a relationship was going to go, or maybe old ideas, old patterns about how a relationship is going to go, because now I'm here and we're doing things a little differently. You're right. And then what was also happening, the North Node was in his first, drawing more focus to him. And so I've noticed when the node is in the first house, there's more focus on that person for whatever reason. They're being called to focus more on themselves. And in his case, it was a medical thing that he had come up, after we'd been dating for a short while, where the focus was really on him as we were working through that, as he was working through that. And so it had nothing to do with like him not having success in his seventh. He was having a lot of success over there. And at the same time, for that about a year and a half, we were very focused on him and his health and all of that. Even though, the relationship itself was fine. And it really ends up being a balancing act. And I think this is what it comes to, all of my discussions around the nodes. It's like I talk about them and their duality, but then we weeble wobble back and forth until you get to kind of a balance. And so I think the nodes come through, they rebalance an area. And if it's in your natal chart, you're going to have to balance what might be competing interests. Anytime there's an opposition, we got two very different areas of life, different life topics that, yeah, it's hard to find space for all of it, to pay attention to all of it all the time. And so there's a bit of a juggling. It feels a bit of like a Two of Pentacles in that Rider-Waite-Smith deck with the nodes, the lunar nodes. The confusion, the lack of boundary, lack of clear boundaries, lack of clear demarcation. That is another thing with the nodes. So, wherever they are, the euphemism I have is that it's a learning curve. Just might take a little elbow grease to figure it out, or it's something that's really great, but it's kind of unwieldy and you got to figure out how to hold it. Um, the North Node can be a lot of drive, a lot of energy towards something. And that's not bad. None of this is bad, but it's just something to navigate. And the nodes will put things to navigate that probably we wouldn't choose off of a multiple choice list if we could avoid them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like, oh, the North Node's your highest potential. It's your, that's where you're headed. So buckle up. But I like to think of it more like you're getting pulled in there. You're being called to focus on whatever those North Node house topics are. That doesn't mean it's going to go easily, and it might take some doing to figure out the topics of that place. And it might take some extra focus, some extra bandwidth to sort through what the dragon is doing in there. Um, so yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. If anyone has any follow-up questions, that's my like very shortened spiel to just give you some basic stuff to add on to those other videos. But yeah, it's not necessarily going to be like a very good or very bad thing. If you got planets or points right on those lunar nodes, like within 3 degrees, that's my own orb I like. Yeah, they're gonna matter. They definitely are there. They're real. They matter. They're worth paying attention to. Okay, let's see what's going on in the chat. Yeah, tapestry, that's another really good question. And we get into some maybe philosophy around astrology, and talking about how timing works with people. But the question is, did anyone else find last week's Mars-Saturn opposition, that kite formation, full moon last week, to be slightly anticlimactic? I was expecting some more major global events, but it didn't feel particularly strong. So yeah, let's take a look. One of the things that was really interesting about this opposition between Saturn and Mars is that we had two benefics that were staring down upon it. So whenever we get this mix of benefic and malefic planets, especially across the same modality, like they're all in cardinal signs, we start to get either a mixed bag, kind of mixed quality of difficult or unfavorable and favorable things. Or I see it as like it kind of mellows out what's difficult, or it kind of sours slightly what is good. So, yeah, there was many instances, I guess, that were so like, yeah, not climactic for me personally. So I have one, or I have a few, but the first one I will share, is that in terms of just this mixed favorability. So my neighbor's neighbor, he works at a Kringle factory. And Kringle is this pastry that is delicious. It's so good. And a forklift driver accidentally drove into a whole pallet of almond and cherry boxes of almond and cherry Kringle. And so they couldn't use it. And all the employees got to take home this Kringle that they couldn't sell. And they gave that to my neighbor, and my neighbor gave it to me. And so I was eating Kringle. And it was because someone else had a bad day at work. A business lost a whole pallet of Kringle. But man, I was living large. So that was awesome. That was very interesting. Also, and if you follow me online, I'm sorry you're hearing this story for like the fourth time because I wouldn't stop talking about it. I had to do a formal event that had my anxiety at 10 out of 10. Just really difficult. I'm an Aquarius rising. It was in my third and my ninth. I had to go and talk to a bunch of old professors from pharmacy school and like pharmacist colleagues and peers. I had to talk to those people for the first time in 4 years and answer to them what I'm doing now, which is this. And only one person laughed at me. They thought I was kidding. They thought I was joking. And then I was like, no, actually, that's my job now. I'm an astrologer full time. And then I started laughing because then they stopped laughing and it was really awkward. But guess what? The food, South African wines, off the chart. Amazing food at this event. So yeah, very mixed company. The other big thing, so there's like kind of this mix that's going to end up in all these weird ways because we have the benefics kind of in charge of this. And, half of that equation was ruled by one of the benefics. And then Jupiter was there to help. So this stabilized things a lot. But the other big thing to note more personally, so I can't speak for global events, but maybe nation states, if you were a mundane astrologer, you could look at a nation map. But timing, if you don't have Mars or Saturn as your Time Lord for the year, if you don't have Aries, Libra as annually profected places, maybe your Time Lords are Venus and Jupiter or one of them. And that's more of the story. Or maybe the story for you was more maybe you had a Mercury activation year where Mercury was a Time Lord. So that's the other big, big reason. And that's why it makes me doing a forecast like I do once a month almost a fool's errand because I can talk all day long about where the moon is and what it's touching, but everyone's got their own Time Lords that are activated. And so some of you are going to be having, Mercury retrogrades hit you more that year, some of you aren't. So that's another big thing to look at if you didn't personally have anything super wild happen. Now, I am a good example because Mars is not my time lord. I have Saturn as a time lord, so that was a thing. But yeah, Mars wasn't. I think it probably would have been even crummier for me. Maybe the food wouldn't have been as good or worth it. Maybe my anxiety would have been at 12 out of 10 if Mars was also a time lord for me. But yeah, and then the last thing, and this is something that I did get into if I don't know if you've already seen my forecast from last month, but I do get a little bit into the weeds because not by the hour. Oh my God, we'll be here all day. If we go back to where the moon was on the exact conjunction on the 8th, the moon was in a trine sextile kind of thing, which took the edge off a little bit. Personally, I found a few days prior when the moon was at the end of Sag going into Capricorn that yeah, it was the 4th, Monday. Ugh, what a not great day for me personally. I got my ass kicked by the forest on that day. And that was the day Moon was coming in contact with Mars and Saturn, and that was a bad day. So that to me was even somehow bigger. And that was before Mars even got into Libra. So I don't know. But yeah, there's a few things at play there, but that's an excellent question because not everything is going to be climactic, even though like on paper it should be. Uh, Excellent question. Alma is asking that they had a horrible day on the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, although they felt like they made a lot of progress with some inner stuff, and that was in your sixth. Oh, are you? That must mean you're also an Aquarius rising. Um, so I don't know what part of if the whole day was funky, because we just had this on the 12th. Let me just be super intense about it. Yeah, it was at 12:30 in the morning Central Time, so that would have been what's that 6:30 a.m. Universal Time. On the 12th on Tuesday, we had Venus and Jupiter making their conjunction in Cancer, but there was one little caveat before that that the moon here had to move through Saturn and Mars. So the moon had to move through that conjunction trash. And I woke up that morning feeling weird. And I forgot about the astrology entirely for like a half hour. And then I looked at my phone after I'd been up for a little bit. And I was like, oh, that's right. The moon has to go through this funky stuff first. Um, and if I that's where astrology really did me a good one because, like, I think I would have let that mood that I woke up with, if I'm being honest with myself, I think I would have let it bother me longer. I think seeing the astrology, I was like, okay, this is going to pass. This is going to be done in a few hours, and then I'm going to have a good day. The moon's going to apply to other things. And my day did get a little better, but it depends on what you run into. You might have had if you had a really difficult thing happen in that little patch before earlier that day, that might have ruined the whole day. So I don't know. but the moon did have some stuff. And that's actually why I thought, maybe like today and tomorrow, we've got the moon in Taurus making a really nice connection with Venus in Cancer. We got a little mutual reception action here. Um, this is very nice. These are my favorite days of the month, today and tomorrow. So, and we can still get, they're still very close, Jupiter and Venus. We can still squeeze the juice, if you will. But I'm sorry you had a bad day. Um, but yeah, the inner work stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I did like some inner child work about like my stage fright. I got inspired from that Miley Cyrus video where she was talking about her like hypno EDMR, like whatever that is. I always want to say EDM therapist. I wish it was electric dance music therapy. Um, yeah, inner work with the water signs. That's a thing. Especially when Jupiter's there, you're dealing with understanding and knowledge, and then Cancer is going inward with it. Ooh, sorry you got the vid, Kate. Hope you sending healing beams. Zap zap to you. Yeah, the 12th house, long-standing challenges or longer term challenges, including health ones. So yeah, if you've got a illness that lasts a while, yeah, both I agree entirely. I used to try to separate Kate saying the sixth and then the 12th house can show intense physical health and mental health ways. Sorry, they can show up in intense physical health and mental health ways. I used to try to separate a bit more like the sixth and the 12th in terms of like what's physical, what's mental, but I kind of just put it all in there now, and I follow more like, okay, Mars is the joy of the sixth. So in Mars, you are going to see a lot more like acute injuries, pestilence, plague, um, Mars stuff, uh, injuries. And in the 12th, we have Saturn, the joy of Saturn, and Saturn is long-standing challenges. So I think more like chronic illness. And of course, you can be in both. Why not both? Zoidberg, why not both? Um, so yeah, it's not necessarily like that everything in the 12th is not physical, because I also have people like say, if you have a very physical patch of psoriasis that you're hiding under a t-shirt, that's pretty 12th housey, but it's still very physical. So yeah, I kind of just I've loosened up and I just kind of say health stuff, disease, it's all the sixth and the 12th. It's all in there. And then I just look at the exact person in chart to do the case by case basis thing. Okay. So yeah, someone did have a better afternoon. And maybe the morning one would have been that morning that the moon was doing some gnarly stuff before that nice conjunction. Yeah, maybe it would have been not as good. We'll never know. That's kind of the thing about like preventative medicine and like, the benefics operate. I'm going to go on a rant. The benefics operate a lot of times in a way that is stabilizing, supportive. It's not always these like extravagant or luxurious kind of things with Venus and Jupiter. And sometimes it's the prevention of, or just the bad things not happening. And so, how do you appreciate, it's like the privilege of having an able body. How do you appreciate that if you've never been disabled? That's a real thing that I see a lot. Like, it's hard to appreciate what, you take for granted. And I see that with preventative medicine too. It's hard to sell people on preventative medicine because they're like, why should I appreciate something that like I can't see it? Like 30,000 people not getting a thing and nothing happening. Like that's the good thing. Like the no news, that's the good news. The boringness, that's the good news. So I think sometimes like the benefics come in like that and I don't know, they're just not as exciting and sexy as I want them personally to be. Okay. Yeah, it's just so connected. Kate brings up a good point with the sixth and the 12th house just being so connected, and they are. I think they're, I mean, yeah, it's like we don't need astrology to tell us there's a mind-body connection. Like we know that. Um, and I think, especially people who've got like connections in their own chart between the 12th and the 6th, you're going to notice that kind of mental, spiritual, physical thing, I think, even more than we already all do. Oh yeah. And another thing I've really loosened up on the 6th and the 12th while we're at it, is animals. I'm just like, you know what? It's all animals. They're all up in there. Maybe like the 12th house being really far remote places, animals in remote places. That's something that keeps coming up in the 12th for me, which a lot of times is like, like dangerous or large, like hippo. But that might be different depending on where you live. So wherever's remote to you, that's like when I was camping a few weeks ago and I had the delight. I haven't seen one in 15 plus years. It's a little lizard called a skink, Skink. And the ones around where I'm from have a really bright blue tail and they're just whimsical. It's amazing that they're real. They don't look real. And I'm like, they're really small, but I almost want to put them in the 12th house because they're just like so difficult and elusive to see. And another thing with the 12th, in terms of like wild animals, I'm just going on a rant. Sorry, y'all. I'm going on the animal rant. Um, like when I was making friends as a child with like I had this cow that I was friends with. Her name was Bonnie. She was awesome. We were good friends for a good year. And that's how I learned that living on a farm is the worst. But me and Bonnie developed a relationship. And I had to sit so still, with like animals. If you're like a birder, you got to sit so still and just not do anything and just wait forever and just spend like an inordinate amount of time just being next to an animal, trying to gain that rapport and that kind of trust. And that's some 12th house shit. That feels like some 12th house shit for sure. Um, I think I'm done with my rant. We should probably move on to lots, unless anyone else has any other questions. Let me see if there are any. Otherwise, I'm just gonna kind of get some foundational information about the lots out there. Someone asked about this, and I think this was, I don't know, last month. I just didn't, I was dropping balls left and right, it seems, because I think this was another thing I was supposed to go over last month because someone asked about Arabic parts, and I've like forgotten who did. And I saw it in my notes, and I was like, shoot, I think I was supposed to talk about that. So I do want to just start off talking about lots and just what they are and give people some resources, which I did not below. I'm going to have to put them later. But one of them, I mean, Chris Brennan, primarily for lots, and also Levant Laszlo of the Horoi Project. And then also Kyra Ryberg, who I just put in the chat. They have a lots guidebook that's excellent and really good. And it's a very helpful little practical. I use it as like a little reference tool for me to quickly look up stuff and validate myself. So I recommend that highly. But yeah, chapter 16, Hellenistic astrology. That's page 511. I'm just going to read about this phrasing and this term first. So this is quoting directly from the book. The lots are the Hellenistic equivalent of what are known in modern astrology as the so-called Arabic parts, with the most famous one being the part of fortune. The term Arabic part is a misnomer, however, as the medieval and Arabic tradition of astrology only began around 775 CE, while this technique had already been in use in the Greco-Roman astrological tradition since at least the first century BCE. Uh, this is kind of a funny part. The fact that the Arabic astrological authors, like, and this is also getting into like the Persian Islamic astrological tradition. So the fact that the Arabic astrological authors expanded the number of lots beyond what they inherited from the Hellenistic tradition seems to have contributed to the latter misconception that the Arabic authors had invented the concept. The 12th century author al-Biruni dryly remarked that the number of lots that were being invented for different purposes increased daily, which is al-Biruni, the Book of Instruction. So that's pretty funny. And there are a ton of lots. It started off with just a few. And then we got these lots that are for like different agricultural products like beans or lentils. There's a lot for children that I use really frequently. That's kind of one of the core ones. So there's a lot of different lots. And so what the heck are these things? That's why they're called Arabic parts, and that's why they're also called lots. So I just wanted to clear that up. And, neither is right or wrong because at the same time, we've got Hellenistic astrology, which Hellene is Greek. And we know that these were a wide variety of people practicing this kind of astrology, not just Greek people. So, I'm not going to judge anyone if they say Arabic parts. And actually, after studying this today and thinking about it, I was starting to say Arabic parts again because that's what I used to say. So, tomato, tomato to me pretty much. But what they are calculated points. So the lot of fortune here, the X-Men looking symbol with the circle in my software. This one, this is a point that is calculated by taking the distance between the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and then projecting that same distance from the ascendant. So for example, we've got, oh, I'm not going to do right now because we've got a sunset chart and it matters. You have to maybe, well, I shouldn't say, yeah, I should. Nope, I'm going to do the complexity later. You're supposed to flip the equation for sect. If you listen to Levant Laszlo in the Horoi Project, he has a whole lecture about how that might not be right. How maybe this whole reversal thing is like a misunderstanding. We're not sure. So it gets deep and complex. But for most practical purposes, 99% of people out there, we are reversing the equation if you're a night chart versus a day chart. But there's a lot of symbolism imbued in these different equations. So for instance, the two main ones, the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit, which speak to different topics. Uh, they are calculated using the luminaries. And these topics are about general life, our fortune that comes into our life, material fortune, health, wealth, our response to that, where our will wants to carry us with a lot of spirit, which feels more free willy. And then we've got a bunch of other lots. We got the lot of Eros, which is calculated using Venus. And then that point projected from the ascendant. Venus is about love. So the lot of Eros is about love. So the lots were actually an alternative, almost an alternative house system. And so instead of, if I want to look at money, I look at the second house. If I want to look at it through the lots, I can also look at the lot of fortune, which is a lot of times about that material world, health and wealth type of fortune that just comes. There's nothing you did to deserve it, for better or for worse. But that's, money in a lot of ways. If people want to look at health, I'm going to look at the first house, the sixth house, and the lot of fortune. If people want to look at love, I'm going to look at the seventh house, the fifth house, Venus, and also the lot of Eros. If I want to look at career and life path, I'm looking at the 10th, I'm looking at the midheaven and the lot of spirit. So the lots really just add in this whole other layer. And I highly recommend reading them, especially if you're a practitioner out there. It's really it fills in a lot of gaps if things just aren't landing in your usual bag of tools. A lot of times the lots help to explain something. So for instance, if, I'm doing a vocational reading and I'm talking about the 10th and it's just not landing. And I'm talking about the 10th ruler and that's not landing and the midheaven isn't landing and nothing that we're exploring is like, no, that doesn't feel right. And that's not really, not done that. I have no intention of doing that. Sometimes what I like to do is then look at the lot of spirit. And maybe it's telling an entirely different story about where that person's will is going to carry them throughout this life, what they might aspire to or how they might respond to life. So it definitely tells a really important part of the story, the lots. So check it out. I'm not gonna, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to muck it up. Chris says it's so good in the book in terms of the symbolism that you can see, like even in the directionality of, say, the lot of fortune, which in a day chart, you start with the sun. So here we've got, oh, who can I use? Let's use Lou. Um, we've got the sun here. We start there and we count around in the direction of the zodiac to the moon. And one of the symbolic points behind this is that this is about the life force of the native. This is about their vitality. And the sun is the most important luminary in a day chart. It is the point that's going to describe their vitality really strongly, versus the moon is more of a secondary point compared to the sun in a day chart. And so even going from the point of most vitality and then ending that equation with the planet that is about less vitality, it makes a lot of sense, It's right there. And if it's a night chart and you flip it, then you start with the moon. Oh, and before I do that, let me, do the projecting around from the ascendant. So that same angle, you project it around from the ascendant. So it should be the same exact angle. And so the lot of fortune actually is an indicator of the lunar phase. Someone could actually just look at that without knowing where the sun and the moon are and be able to reverse engineer. So in a night chart, you would start with the moon and then count around to the sun and then project that out. So there's a few ways of thinking about it and doing it, and I'm not going to get into those details, but just I want people to know what they are. Lots are points that describe topics. They're calculated by taking the distance between two other planets or points. They start to add more than planets eventually, and you use other lots and stuff like that. It gets pretty meta. And then they take that distance and project it out from the ascendant to place that lot. So that's basically how they're calculated. Astroseek.com has an awesome calculator that I barely understand how to use. But you can pretty much plug in whatever you want and they will do it. So play around with that lot calculator on Astroseek. And that's what I have on lots. Any questions on lots while I'm here? And there's more lots than that. I mean, there's the traditional 7 hermetic lots. So like necessity is one. I'll pull that up if someone's really struggling with something or has like this obligation that they just can't get around. I'll pull up the lot of necessity. For fertility astrology, of course, I'll bring up the lot of children. So I bring them up in a kind of case by case as needed basis. All right. I think those were all my main. I just really wanted to get through those 3 things. Romance elections, nodes, and lots. And I told you about my forklift Kringle. That was awesome. Um, yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. So last call, if anyone has any other questions, any other transits, anything they want to go through. Actually, I brought it up. Why the heck did I have Lou Pearlman up here? Let me show you. This will be, oh my gosh, stop share. That's my whole screen. I want to bring up, okay, I was looking for weird Jupiter Cancer people. I was looking for examples of people who have Jupiter in Cancer who essentially are like not cool people. Because I know cool people with Jupiter in Cancer, but I kept seeing it in like cult leader charts, like the oh, what was the guy now? Jonestown, Jupiter in Cancer. Lou Pearlman, Jupiter in Cancer. There was who are my other ones? I have a list. I didn't think I would go through this, but then I had them up here. Yeah, Jim Jones, Lou Pearlman. Were those my only two? I feel like there was another one, but another culty guy. And the only thing I can think of is that, or no, the third thing was actually, it was around 9/11. It was the nationalism of the United States around 9/11. Also happened with Jupiter and Cancer. So, with Jupiter, especially Jupiter in a night chart, and if you have this in your birth chart, this is not necessarily you, everything, every planet, every sign, it can come out in a spectrum of skillful all the way to unskillful ways. It depends on the whole chart. It depends on the person, especially in Cancer. It's like, where is that moon at? What is the moon doing? What other planets can see Jupiter? So it is always a recipe, right? But let's talk about when Jupiter isn't going well. And I am actually going to throw a link in here. This is an old one from Robert Hand. It's from the NORWAC site. It's talking about Jupiter as a malefic and what happens when Jupiter is kind of functionally behaving as a malefic, not actually. And you can see entitlement. You can see, it's like the yes. It's like, oh, yes to everything. Yes, 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 yes. And as soon as there's a no, then there's a real big problem. So again, if you have this in your chart, not saying that's you, but when you get put together people like Lou Pearlman, who, okay, I'm doing a horrible job at this. He was the guy in charge of NSYNC. I'm taking it for granted that not everyone is an elder millennial. They were in charge of NSYNC and O-Town and all of these boy bands. There was some Netflix documentary on it, but just such an entitled person that just take, take, take. Oh, and some guy who had a blimp. Was it Lou Pearlman that had the blimp? I think he had a blimp or a Zeppelin or something ridiculous. Just extravagant wealth when we think about like the abundance of Jupiter and Cancer and like the growth. And, you here in general, you would think it would be more orderly growth and sustainable growth, but that's not always the case. And when Jupiter gets to be too strong, doing too much of Jupiter, sometimes that is, taking things that aren't freely offered. So, including in Jim Jones's case, people's passports. It's feeling entitled to certain things. And then the protectiveness and the paranoia that can happen. I often say I'm probably offending people. I call Cancer diet-free caffeine light Scorpio because they're both really good at threat detection. They kind of use it for different things. Like Cancer's over there growing a sprout. Let's get Lou Pearlman off of here because he disturbs me greatly. Uh, but yeah, Cancer is really good at protecting what it's growing. It's really good at rooting out threats, weeding. Austin Coppock talks about the wall around the garden that protects the garden, and that's great. But then when that gets too much, we're starting to keep out things that actually we don't need to be keeping out. And we get kind of this, we want to be so safe that it gets kind of that sense of wanting to protect gets amplified to a distorted level. So again, not going to be super common in everyone, but I've seen it enough in celebrity, these various celebrity examples, certain mundane examples where Jupiter in Cancer does weird things. So that's why I had Lou Pearlman up. I just want to explain myself. I was exploring what goes wrong with Jupiter in Cancer, probably. Um, it's kind of a nuanced thing to discuss, but that gave people time to do a last call, which no one needs. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Uh, Thank you for your questions and your follow-up questions. I'm going to put all the links that I failed to put before. I'll put them down there below now. And so again, those were some of that nodal stuff from January, February office hours. I'm going to put some links to learn about lots from Chris Brennan, Laszlo of the Horoi Project, and Kyra Ryberg. And then I am going to put a link about Jupiter being very different than we're used to from Robert Hand. I'll put that below as well. And I think that is it. So thank you everyone so much. I don't have any any interesting things really going on at all for the rest of the month. I have my usual forecast, which I have planned for the 29th of August, Friday, at 12 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be doing the forecast for September. Oh, I think I'm remembering the last thing that I really wanted to say. And this was actually an omission. I forgot to mention it during my last forecast. But this is actually happening leading into, I don't even know if I'll get a chance to talk about it. Uh, Saturn is regressing back into Pisces. So that's happening on September 1st. So that'll be the first thing I talk about in that forecast. It's going to be August 29th at noon, Friday. Saturn's going back into Pisces. So, you know, we've had that before. They're going to be wrapping up their unfinished business that they have been doing there since March of 2023. That's when Saturn first got into Pisces. They dipped out of here. Now I've forgotten. Mm, they dipped out of here. Oh, May 24th. So we've had Saturn out of Pisces now for a good couple months. We'll have them out of there for 3 months or so by the time they get back. What I have noticed, and I think I am tapping into this a little bit more because I'm a Saturn rising person, but my patience is way down. I was a way more patient person when Saturn was in Pisces. I was less judgmental. I was very much more, by the grace of God, go I. We're all susceptible to propaganda. And I've been finding ever since Saturn got into Aries, and if you have this in your birth chart, again, this is not you because you've had your whole life to work with this. I don't have Saturn in Aries. I don't know how to hang. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm impatient. I'm spicy. I'm so spicy. Oh my gosh, you guys. I don't know how I'm not going to get myself into trouble. I'm going to get myself into trouble. I keep wanting to talk about kindness, even though it only makes people angry when I talk about kindness. Because everyone thinks I'm talking about passivity. I swear to God, like people are so misunderstood. I cannot I cannot wait until Saturn gets back into Pisces. I need them back in there right now. I miss it. I don't care that I was depressed. I don't care that I had some vega and melancholy and I was like thinking dark thoughts. That's way better than the spiciness I have been having, and it is going to be a long 2.5 years, my friends. Um, Definitely gonna have to get my shit together. But on the first, I am going to try to collect my shit so that when Saturn goes back into Aries next February, that I'm not like this, that I have it together. Because yeah, I just to give you an idea, a solicitor peeked into my window the last week and I yelled at them. My Buddhism practice is not it's a practice. It is a practice. I'm spicy boy now, so watch out, everyone. Watch out, solicitors and proselytizers. Please pay attention to my sign. Do not knock on my door. I am a hermit. Thank you, everyone, so much. Got some nice comments here. Appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, and if anything is happening on anyone's Chiron, someone's mentioning Chiron. Um, that's another one where it's like, I'm not just a traditional astrologer because I definitely agree that Chiron is real. We're bringing in that's a thing. I wish it wasn't so, but I definitely notice when Chiron is being part of the transits and the configurations. So you probably are too. Best of luck, my friend. Yeah, good luck, everyone. And I will see you on August 29th, noon Central Time, Friday, for my September forecast. And we'll talk about eclipses. And hopefully even before that I'll have some information out about eclipses. So watch out for that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your questions. Sorry it took me 2 months to get to them, but till next time.